I did receive a deposit into my account, as many of my colleagues have, but unfortunately, it was not the full amount owed. So we're still waiting on to be made whole with that, and really unsure about how things will move going forward with the next pay period. It's the executive order. We're trying to figure out exactly what it means and if it will continue or if it was just for the back pay. We just don't know. The agency is sending out emails and letting officers know that the pay period that's missing, which is the half of the pay period, is supposed to be deposited this week, but we just don't know yet. Officers have gone into debt. Credit has been shot. Officers have been evicted. Cars have been repossessed. So in order, that money is needed in order to get some sense of normalcy back to officers' everyday lives. This is terrible on all levels. Congress should really be ashamed of themselves, especially while they receive a paycheck and then they have the nerve to go on recess while they haven't done the business that needs to be taken care of. This morning, I did receive.
Artemis 2 astronauts could fly deeper into space than any humans ever, about 250,000 miles from Earth. And once the spacecraft goes behind the moon, the astronauts will be out of all contact with Earth for about 40 minutes. Flight director Jeff Radigan told us he'll be counting the seconds.
If something should go awry, you've got the lives of 4 astronauts on your hands.
I do. That's a heavy weight, and I think about that every day. My job is to bring Reed, Victor, Christina, and Jeremy home safely. These are my colleagues, these are my friends, and they're my responsibility.
There will be a period of about 40 minutes when you will be out of contact with the Earth.
That's when we will be closest to the moon, farthest from the Earth. But it also is a human moment, and I would love for us to have a moment of togetherness, for humans to just go, hey, there's a part of humanity that's not in touch with the rest of us. And let's just get them all back. And then we can go back to the hustle and bustle. But I hope that inspires folks to just have a moment of togetherness.
The art.
It is a big question. And I want to highlight, I guess, maybe one facet of this is the tension, I call it. I live in this, this dichotomy between happiness that a young woman can look at Christina and just physicalize her passion or her interest, or even if it's not something she wants to do, she can just be like girl power, and that's awesome. And that young brown boys and girls can look at me and go, hey, he looks like me and he's doing what? And that's great. I love that. But I also hope we are pushing the other direction, that one day we don't have to talk about these first, that one day this is just, and I listen to this, that this is the human history. It's about human history. It's the story of humanity, not Black history, not women's history, but that it becomes human history. It is.
Victor Glover talking about human history as he prepares to make history today. Welcome to Black Press USA's morning show, where we bring you the headlines and the culture. And my co-host this morning is the legendary voice, a legendary voice in West Coast broadcasting, best known for his long and impactful tenure at 102.3 KJLH in Los Angeles, the station famously owned by Stevie Wonder. And he is a huge arts and culture advocate. Welcome, Greg Johnson. Good morning, Greg.
Good morning, Neil. How are you today? What an honor and privilege to be here with you today.
I am so glad for you to be here. We've labored and competed sometimes in these LA streets working for different radio stations, but it was all for community. Either way it went. But you heard, before we get a little bit into you, let's recap the videos that we saw. First off, TSA, a huge, important story that should not be lost because people think they got their paychecks, because you just heard from that gentleman that they haven't really been paid. People have been evicted, cars have been taken, and they still don't have all their money and don't know if they're going to get their next check. What are your thoughts about that?
You know, it's a tragedy, you know, with these are human stories out there. I do ask the question, though, is the Department of Homeland Security really shut down? I mean, don't they have cases and all that kind of stuff? Why are we just focused on the TSA? I mean, it's an important story, but the news and everything that they want us to pay attention to is the TSA agents. And I think there's a larger picture here. I feel like this is a big distraction that's going on, because I know that those are the Homeland Security, they're like secret agents and stuff. They're out there doing enforcement work and anti-terrorism work. Are all of those workers not being paid just like the TSA workers, or are we just being, you know, focusing on the workers in the airport? And also too, are the workers in the airport, because by and large, Black, by and large, women, by and large, immigrants, are they purposely bullying these populations that happen to work for the DHS at the airports? I mean, you know, there's just so many questions that I have about this topic, and I just wish the government would do right by these people. It's just not right. And then also, you know, do right by our security, because we all are supposed to be out there patrolling and keeping us safe. You know, get to it, pay the people.
That, I mean, you bring up some great points, because there are other agencies within Homeland Security, and we don't know if they're getting paid. We haven't heard their stories. And then to bring up about the TSA and the ethnicity, and is race playing a factor? These are all great questions that we should be considering as they try to trick us and bombard us with other headlines, except the real ones, like the ones you just brought up, and of course, the Epstein files. But on a good note, today is a good day for NASA. You know, back in the day, I know when I was growing up, you know, when spaceships went up in the sky, it was stop everything. Breaking news. Everybody sitting in front of the TV to find out what's happening. But today, not so much. But nevertheless, Black history is being made today with Victor Glover.
Yeah, it really is important. And he made an excellent point that, you know, maybe one day we can get to where it's just a human achievement. But, you know, it is what it is. And you know, I'm a veteran, and I worked in the aviation wing of the Marine Corps, and it was a big deal just to see a Black fighter pilot, you know what I mean? And now we're looking and seeing, you know, brothers going to the moon. Look, who is that? Is Gil Scott Heron? Is Whitey's on the Moon? That's a song, you know, back in the day. That's how we looked at it, right? That we would never achieve those heights. They would never allow us, you know, to achieve those heights. And to see this brother, you know, in his, you know, no, he's not the first Black astronaut, but certainly one of the most dangerous and you know, ambitious missions that NASA has had thus far. And it sounds like he's the commander. I don't know what his rank is in terms of the crew that they have, but he looked like he was the commander there. That's a big deal, man. I love it. I love it. I love it. And we pray their traveling mercies, as the sisters would say.
And the gentleman would say too. But let's jump into our morning poll, because we have a lot to get through today. We have two special guests with important information about issues impacting our Black experience here. Nice. So our poll for the morning chat is slowly getting in this morning, but our poll today is Victor Glover becomes the first Black astronaut to fly a lunar mission. What does this giant leap mean to most of you in the chat? Is this long overdue recognition? The hidden figures are finally seen. Is it B, STEM inspiration, showing our kids the sky isn't the limit? Is it C, a distraction from Earth? We need that funding for healthcare, Medicaid, and of course, Homeland Security. Or is it D, pure Black excellence, just proud to see us leading the way? Drop in the chat what you think. Greg, what do you think about these options in our morning poll?
Yes, I'm going to go with D for sure, and B and D.
B and D. You know, I love us because we never pick one. We never pick one. Or we always make a E. Yes. None of the above or all of the above, but we never gonna pick one. I love it. I'm finding that as I'm doing my own poll or survey, and that's what my analysis coming out to. Black folks never pick one option. I think I'm gonna go with C and D. A distraction from Earth, which I love it. That's why I love this black space, because, you know, this right here is a distraction from Earth and everything that's going on, but also pure black excellence, because no matter what, I'm just proud to see us leading the way. And we're getting some D's. Nancy Wall says D. Michelle Madison says D. Pure black excellent. You know, so this is happening today, folks. So you could definitely check in, and we'll definitely report on what happens. If anything, you know, hopefully, well, hopefully they'll see a Martian or something. They'll talk about something they didn't see, because they did say for 40 minutes there's going to be no contact. Period.
Man, how scary is that? And like, just think about it. Total silence. If something goes wrong, well, you know, look, any along the way, anything could go wrong, you know, but just not knowing. Wow.
For 40 minutes. So it's interesting. So we'll be tracking that. So be sure to keep up with blackpressusa.com. Let's jump into our first story. According to a recent stories from the GRIO and the NAACP, the slashing of nearly $1 trillion from Medicaid has placed 65% of births by Black mothers at high risk. Mix that with Southern states regulating women's bodies, and you have a deadly weapon against Black women. This video that we're about to watch is circulating this week, and we should all be concerned. Take a look.
My name is Michael Khalil. I'm a circuit court judge here in Jacksonville, Florida. The state of Florida has filed a petition for declaratory judgment. They're asking for an emergency C-section be granted by the court.
I have not had a chance to be able to consult with my own legal representation, and I'm trying to understand how you are taking my rights away as a patient to be able to decide my own care. A real judge, you know?
My name is Michael Khalil. I'm a circuit court judge here in Jacksonville.
To give me an emergency C-section against my will.
Well, let me ask you about that. What about the risks to the child?
Anytime you go into childbirth, whether you do a vaginal or a C-section, there's inherent risk to the mother and the baby. I have other children out here in the world that need me. If I die from a C-section, nobody on this call is going to take care of my children. To give me an emergency.
So, I mean, there you have it. You have a woman having to advocate for her body and her rights from a hospital bed. And Sharice is a doula. She's a doula. So she knows what she's talking about. Thank God that judge gave her the autonomy of her body to make that decision. She, anyway, had to have a C-section. But the fact that they put her on a Zoom call in her hospital bed to force her to do something that she wasn't willing to do at the time with her body is wild and dangerous.
It's really something. I'm surprised. I didn't know she was a doula, and I was actually going to comment that, you know, this seems like this is why we need more doulas. My daughter is a doula, and I know quite a few, and I see that movement rising, and it's needed in our community. The mortality rates of Black infants is really something. Here in Long Beach, where I'm based at, there is a large activism towards infant mortality. We have a whole big thing called Black Infant Health. It's a whole big, you know, movement, and it's an issue. Black babies are dying, and to see this piece here is even more alarming. When we have to go into the care of the medical healthcare system, we have to be able to advocate, and advocating requires, information and education so we can properly, defend ourselves. I guess what we're doing here is helping do that for the community.
100%. I mean, and here in California, we were the first state to pass the Omnibus Act. We know Lauren Underwood from a federal level, who is a former nurse, who is now a Congress member representing the state of Illinois, is a huge advocate for Black maternal health and just, advocating for health and wellness for people of color across this country. That's why representation matters. And that's why I said it's a weapon against Black women, especially in the South, because that was down South. And we know that for the strangest reason, it's mind-boggling to me why white men want to control not just Black women, but what women do with their bodies. Why do they feel the need to control what we do with our bodies? It's just insane. It's gross. And there are some mental challenges, I think, with white men when it comes to women and them wanting to control us.
Yeah. Well, there you have it.
It is just insane. Orange says, well, America, welcome to what Black people go through on a daily basis. When it comes to pre and postnatal care, my home state of Louisiana ranks 48th in the nation when it comes to pre and postnatal. So let's continue this health conversation. Our guest that we were trying to have yesterday, I'm going to give you this intro again, sis, because you so deserve it. She's a powerhouse in the medical and advocacy space. Diagnosed with sickle cell disease at just 3 years old, she turned her personal battle into a professional mission. She's a bridge builder, uniting patients, researchers, and healthcare leaders to ensure no one fights sickle cell alone. Welcome, Dr. Lakiea Bailey.
Hello.
Good morning.
Can you hear me this time?
Yes.
And I hear you.
Welcome. Amen.
Thank you. Thank you.
Amen. I know you were in the back listening. Before we get into your conversation, just want to get your thoughts on the video that you saw, and what that means between healthcare and patients, especially Black women.
I think bodily autonomy is the point here. Medically, I can understand why there might be an urgency for a C-section, but we have to decide whether or not we're going to allow women to choose. And that means going either direction. Choose what to do with their bodies, and then choose whether or not to risk their bodies. We can't say that we are going to make the decision in one, but we want you to make the decision in the other. I think we're going to have to come to a understanding and recognition that my autonomy overrides my medical experience. And I feel that personally. My autonomy overrides that. And so it doesn't matter. Either it matters or it doesn't. If you're telling me that it is medically dangerous for a C-section, which one is more important? And at the end of the day, I genuinely believe it is that woman's autonomy that matters. Because if you can take it right there, you can take it anywhere else.
And last question about that. Should Americans be alarmed that you can be in a hospital bed and be taken to court on a Zoom with, it looked like 8 or 9 people? Does that alarm you to see something like that happening for a patient in a hospital?
It does. And yes, America should be very alarmed because she is not an isolated case. And people being in sickle crisis, which we'll talk about in a second, and being arrested because that nurse didn't believe they were truly in pain. Or maybe they got loud because I am in excruciating pain and you're ignoring me, and being dragged from their bed and arrested or brought to court. America should be very alarmed because she is not an isolated case. Yes, ma'am.
So let's jump into this conversation about sickle cell and your story. You transition from being a patient to a molecular hematologist, which is huge. How does having that dual perspective as both a doctor and a patient change the way you approach sickle cell advocacy?
I think it is the fact that I am a patient that really informs both sides. I do have the degrees in molecular hematology, regenerative medicine. I have the doctorates in all of these. But I think at the end of the day, and I genuinely feel it is my experience as a patient, that much like the other conversation, it very much overrides that. What the various degrees and all of that has allowed me to do is it's granted me access in spaces where often you'll look around the room and I might realize that there's only a handful of Black faces. But if you ever look around those rooms at the highest of levels, the Black people in the room are often also the most educated in the room. And so I think it has allowed me access to spaces that I might not have had access to before, where I can continue to advocate for myself, my illness, and my people.
Greg?
Wow, I'm still on molecular hematologist. Tell me that's fascinating, and I'm proud of you. I'm so proud of you. I'm overwhelmed. I said, "Oh, molecular hematologist." Now, Uncle Greg needs to ask you though, what exactly is that?
Molecular hematology is hematology at the minute level, on a molecule level. What is going on at the smallest of details in hematology? What is causing that sickling event? Why is our blood reacting differently? How can we medicate that? How can we treat it? So it's hematology, but not at the patient level, at the molecular level, to develop the treatments that can then go to those at the bedside. I work at the bench. I am one of the ones looking for the cures, looking for treatments, looking for ways to help. Then it goes from the bench to the bedside. And that's the hematologist you're familiar with. I'm the molecular side, what's happening at the tiniest of levels in our body.
So we know there are deep-seated disparities in how sickle cell is treated. And so compared to other genetic diseases, what is the most critical resource or policy change the community needs right now?
That is a big question because there are so many on every level. We are underfunded significantly. There's a greater population, say a lot of people compare us to cystic fibrosis, another rare disease. We are much, much, much more than they are, but they have a very large, significantly different amount of dollars invested per patient than we do. And there's the disparity there, but also all the way from the bench to the bed, from the amount of resources allocated to treating it, to once treatments are available, is it actually available? Because there is something on the market now, but it's a $2 million price tag. How do I access that? And then all the way to the bedside. If I go to I have sickle cell disease, I go to the hospital right now in excruciating pain. At least 60% of the people that are going to treat me are going to behave as though I am drug seeking, that I am there because I simply want narcotics. And I have explained to people many a times, if that's all I wanted, there are easier ways to get it than coming and subjecting myself to the American healthcare system. I am here because I am sick. But we are treated as though we're drug seeking. And so what needs to change, what policies need to change? I honestly think we're going to have to start with the culture of how we treat Black patients. And if we can work with the culture, we can then deal with the policy.
Where does that begin? Because I think oftentimes when you go into the doctor's office, they're making assumptions, stereotypes. Like when I go in, I'm a fairly, they say I have a reasonable portion of health, but I noticed that they are immediately asking if I, thinking I have high blood pressure, not asking, but thinking I already have high blood pressure and all of those things, and I don't, and then they're very, very surprised. And I always thought about it, it's like, wow, that's a grand assumption by you, just because I'm a Black male of a certain age that I would have these types of maladies. Where does that start where we can have, I guess, better interpretation, not so many stereotypes on our health?
I genuinely think we're going to have to go all the way back to med school bias. That the assumptions, Black male, certain age, must be high blood pressure. The assumption that Black people have a higher pain tolerance than any others. That is still genuinely believed in a lot of medical spaces. The assumption that all of these assumptions, actually. There's so many, and we're going to have to go back to the med school level and educate, because the turnover at educating on the ER level, for example, is substantial. The turnover, we would be educating all day, every day until the end of time. We're going to go back and have to grab them when they're learning these misconceptions. I also think, and this might be a bit controversial, but I think it's time for us as a people to become a little bit more litigious. It is time to stop accepting some things just the way it is and fighting back. And we are one of the least litigious groups that there is, but we're going to have to start forcing some change.
Let's talk about your upcoming convening from April 7th to the 11th. You're hosting a massive gathering in Atlanta. For those who have never heard or attended, can you give us some information about it?
I can. So it's the 10th. So what flashed on the screen was actually last year's. But if you go to sicklecellevents.org, we are having our 10th Leadership Summit. This is where we gather leaders in the sickle cell space and others in the general population that want to learn more about sickle cell and how to address policy level change, how to address healthcare change, what's going on in healthcare, what can we do as organizations and as advocates and leaders in this space to affect care change. And then it is followed up immediately by a convening of sickle cell stakeholders, the United Action Forum. So the Leadership Summit is the 7th through the 11th, and then the 11th and 12th is the United Action Forum. We're doing this there you are. Those are the two events right there. We're doing this in partnership with the Sickle Cell Disease Coalition of the American Society of Hematology. And it's a calling in of all different stakeholder groups, from media to providers to insurers to all of us to the table to begin discussing and addressing how we can collectively work together to improve healthcare outcomes for those living with sickle cell disease. So it's two meetings, but one main purpose and cause and goal. And we can learn more all about it at sicklecellevents.org. And that's our summit right there. This is our 10th. Very, very excited. We have over 100 organizational partners. Because of the recent craziness with your first story that was going on in the airports, many of our partners chose to be virtual this year. I think we have maybe about 53 to 60 organizations joining us and about maybe just as many independent leaders and advocates. But then we also have providers, pharmaceutical companies, government, lots of different groups that are all joining us in order to discuss how we can continue to be the change. And if I can just add, when you're chronically ill, you are taught helplessness. You can't do this, you can't do that. Helplessness is learned. We at the Sickle Cell Consortium believe that helplessness can be, if it can be learned, it can be unlearned. And the goal is to put the power in the hands of patients and caregivers to affect the change that we know is needed in this space.
Well, thank you so much for joining us this morning. And we'll definitely be continuing this conversation because we know that sickle cell impacts African Americans the most. It's like when white folks get a cold, Black folks catch pneumonia. We know this is one of our pneumonia cases. And so we will continue to amplify this story. Thank you so much, Dr. Bailey.
Thank you for having me.
For sure. All right. Let's head to Oklahoma. We're nearly 10 years after Tulsa police killed Terence Crutcher. His family lawsuit is finally moving forward. So this means, you have to continue to pursue. So joining us now is a man who has dedicated his life to the pursuit of justice for the city of Tulsa. Welcome, civil rights attorney, the people's attorney, Demario Solomon Simmons. Good morning, Attorney Simmons.
Hey, good morning. Good to see you guys.
Yeah, as always. So this was one of the huge headlines that broke yesterday. And I'm so glad that you shared it. My phone hit an alert and I was like, okay, talk to us about this case and why it is so important for Black Americans to be paying attention.
Yeah, first of all, thank you for having me on this morning. I'm so excited to tell people about this breakthrough that happened. Let me level set, get some context. Over almost 10 years ago, September 16th, 2016, Terence Crutcher, who was a father and a son and a brother, had an issue where he encountered a white police officer by the name of Betty Shelby, a Tulsa police officer, on the side of a road it wasn't dead of night. It was daylight out. And the video, we all saw Terence walking away with his hands up high. He had no weapon. He was not a threat. He was complying with the orders, and yet he was shot and killed right there on the street. And not only was he shot, they allowed him to lay on the street for over 2 minutes, bleeding out before anyone even came to his aid. And then he was victimized of a smear campaign that he said somehow caused his own demise. And Betty Jo Shelby went to a criminal trial in May of 2017. Unfortunately, she was acquitted, which was a big, big blow to everyone around the nation, because this case was one of those hands up, don't shoot cases. And so we've been litigating the civil case since that time, and we've had a lot of challenges, and our case was dismissed, and we had to go to the 10th Circuit here in Denver, Colorado. And Monday eve afternoon, they decided to reverse the dismissal of the case and take off the qualified immunity shield that had been put around Betty Shelby so we can move forward with a trial against her.
Wow. I mean, it's really, really something. The more we win, the more, it just keeps going, right? And so let me just ask you now, as you've gone the route on this whole case, are there any points in time where you were like, okay, we should just give up? Or did you just keep on going? Are you just never give up, never quit?
Listen,
what has been the biggest challenge for you in this case?
I do live about a mantra: never surrender, never retreat. But that doesn't mean I don't have days where I'm tired. I don't have days where I'm like, man, this is too hard. I don't have days like I could be doing something so much easier and make way more money. Of course I have those days. You're talking about 10 years of litigation, humiliation, discrimination. I'm a human being like everyone else. However, I have to stand strong on the shoulders of my ancestors and understand what they went through. I'm just the first person in my family that's pretty much born with all my rights. My mother was born in 1955. My father was born in 1952. They integrated schools, neighborhoods, was spat on, had houses egged and tires slashed. So anytime I have that despair, and I do have it, I remember where I come from. I'm a Black Creek Indian. My family walked the Trail of Tears. My ancestors signed a treaty of 1866 that ended enslavement in the Creek Nation. My family endured the Tulsa Race Massacre. So all those things factor into the fight that I have. My mantra, my personal motto is law is my ministry, justice is my passion. So I have to move through it, but absolutely. And I want everyone to understand that. We're just ordinary people like anyone else, just like Dr. King or Malcolm X or anybody else in history that we love and put up on a pedestal. They were ordinary people that did extraordinary things. And so they had to deal with the emotions, the hurt, the heartache, the odds, obstacles, and obstacles, just like everyone else.
So what does this reversal mean for the family, and how soon can we expect to see this back in front of a jury?
This means everything for the family, the community, and for the nation, anyone that's against qualified immunity. This is a doctrine that was put together. It's not in the Constitution. It's not in the 1871 Civil Rights Act, which actually give us the right to sue state actors for violating our constitutional rights. This was something that was created by the United States Supreme Court in 1982, and it's been used as a shield around these officers and other government officials that violate our rights. And so this is a fight that we've been having for a long time in this country to repeal qualified immunity. So this case is another plank in that battle, another opportunity to see why this is such a bad thing, because it causes a family to suffer for years and years and years while this officer continues to be held not accountable. And so we're excited about it because this is a powerful opinion that I think other families and other lawyers will utilize to help fight against qualified immunity overall. For the family, this means everything.
I want to stick on qualified immunity for a minute because we see so many cases die because of qualified immunity.
Yes.
So how did you break through that shield in this instance? And does this set you kind of brought that up, but how does this set a new precedent for other civil rights cases across the country?
Well, I think three things. One, it went back to what the law actually states. Since Tennessee versus Gardner, and which was reaffirmed with and back in the early 1980s, it has been settled law that you cannot shoot an individual who is not posing a threat, period. And so the 10th Circuit just said, hey, let's go back to the basics. And so that's one of the things we want courts to do. Go back to the basics. Number two, I think we're able to overcome this because we have such a clear video. It's clear on the video that his hands were up. He did not have a weapon. I mean, one of the quotes that the 10th Circuit stated in their opinion was Terence didn't have a duty to comply with dropping a weapon because he had no weapon. And so what are we talking about here, right? So sometimes we have to just tell the court, and the court has to just believe their own eyes. Look at the video. And then the third thing, I think this will be something that can help from a precedent standpoint, because this is a 10th Circuit opinion. It's a published opinion. Well, it's a 10th Circuit opinion. I don't know if it's published, if it's going to be officially published. That's a legal thing. But it's a 10th Circuit opinion that lays out very, very clearly what is the actual standard to even get qualified immunity. And she did not meet that standard today on this case. And the court was very, very, very clear. They really went very basic on the district judge and said, you got this wrong.
Let me ask you this. I mean, first of all, I would like to comment one of the slides that was shown here today. You had your arm around the grieving mom there, the grieving wife.
Sister. That was a twin sister, Terence Crutcher's twin sister.
Twin sister, you know. And so I've been in that situation where you put your arm around the grieving family of one who has lost a loved one to the hard hand of the police. It is the darndest thing ever. I mean, in my life experience in the community, you know, how do you know, describe your feeling on that? And then did the police learn anything from this? Sometimes, you know, let's face it, we do need law enforcement in our communities, no question. But I would hope that police departments learn from these incidents like this. Do you think that this particular law enforcement agency has learned anything from the tragedy that is before us?
Well, first, to answer your first question about consulting a client, and you know, I've been doing civil rights law for over 20 years, and I've been in that situation dozens of times, and it's always difficult because, you know, I need to be there. You know, as a lawyer, I'm an attorney and counselor at law, and that counselor part comes in, and so you have to absorb all that emotion. You have to be strong for the family. You know, you're fighting at that point. That was the day after the shooting, and so we're still trying to figure out exactly what's happening. We're still trying to make sure that the officer gets investigated. We want them to be criminally charged. We're trying to maintain and manage the whole media apparatus, manage the family, help them through it. So it's something that I thank God that I can do that, and I have the fortitude to be able to absorb that and still be very positive and strong for the client. So it's something I thank God for, but it's definitely a difficult thing. And so, you know, I have a therapist. You know, I go fishing. I try to do these things to clear my mind and keep me straight on the straight and narrow. To your second question, has the Tulsa Police Department learned their lesson? I would say no, and it's not just my opinion. I'm looking at the data that Black people are still policed much more aggressively here in Tulsa. Black people are still subject to much more physical abuse or excessive force here in Tulsa and in the state of Oklahoma in general, but in Tulsa. I also look at the fines and fees of Black folks are happening much more aggressively here in Tulsa. So I would say no. And part of the reason they haven't learned their full lesson because they haven't been held accountable. You know, if we take this case and get back to trial, and Nayla, you asked about when the trial, we don't know when the court will set the trial. But if we have that opportunity, the full story will come out, including the cover up. Because after Terence was shot, Betty Shelby, who's on the screen here, she was supposed to go directly downtown and be questioned about what happened. That did not happen. They sent her back to her home precinct. They gave her 3 days before she was questioned. They didn't talk about how they had eyewitnesses. This is on video, guys. Eyewitnesses, they made them leave the scene without getting their name or a statement. They tamper with the evidence. So if we have that trial, all of that's going to come out. And maybe at that point, after they have to get a huge verdict against them and the corruption is exposed to the world, then maybe they'll make a wholesale change that we need.
We have a couple of questions from the chat. First, Dr. Marilyn wants to know, is the officer still employed as an officer? And then Orangey wants to know, with the Trump's DOJ recently ruling with the cops who had a part in Breonna Taylor's murder, do you think the feds will help the civil case?
Well, first of all, no, the feds, they closed the investigation under Trump when it was open in 2016, and then they closed the investigation. And then we tried 4 years to try to get the Biden administration to reopen the criminal case, and we were unsuccessful, unfortunately. So we have no illusions that the Trump DOJ is going to come and open this investigation. So no help from the federal government. What was the first question? The
officer. Is the officer still employed?
She is no longer a Tulsa police officer. She was allowed to retire. She was never disciplined, so she was allowed to retire. She went to another agency here in the vicinity, and then she left the state. So to our knowledge, she's no longer a police officer. But I will tell you, for many years after the shooting, she was going around the country teaching a course on how officers can survive being falsely accused of shooting individual. Yes. So if you Google, if anyone listening, Google Betty Shelby and training, you will see the course that she was actually teaching around the country to other police agencies about the pitfalls and how she survived being falsely accused. And I talk about some of this more in depth from just behind the scenes in my book that's coming out, Redeem a Nation. And these are the type of cases that kind of continues to feed my work, along with all the Tulsa race massacre and other civil rights cases, because there's so much that goes on outside of the headlines. There's so much that goes on outside of us in the courtroom that families have to deal with that is unbelievable when you really peel back and see what's going on.
You brought up Tulsa, so let's pivot to that, and let's talk about the Greenwood legacy. As we mark 120 years of Greenwood and the 105th anniversary since the massacre, how does the Terence Crutcher victory tie into the larger fight for reparations and justice for Tulsa?
Great question. You know, unfortunately, the Crutcher family sits at the intersection of all those things. They are race massacre descendants. Their great grandmother, Rebecca Brown Crutcher, was a survivor of the massacre. They're also descendants of Black Creek Indians, and now they are victims of police violence. So we really see in them everything that we're fighting for, all those three major fronts. And to see this victory at this time, even though we're not done, we have more work to do. The community is very, very inspired by this work, because they said, listen, we cannot just allow one of our people to be shot dead in the street and nothing happens. So I think it gives us a lot of momentum going into this 105th anniversary of the massacre. And I love that you highlighted that this is also the 120th anniversary of the founding of Greenwood, the founding of a community that was the richest, most organized community in the history of Black folks, had more Black professionals per capita than any place else in the history of the United States. A place that had more Black millionaires per capita than any other place in the United States. But more important to all of that, it was a community that had so much love that it put everything on the line to save the life of a shoeshine boy named Dick Rowland. And so this gives us the momentum, because what we're saying in this 120th year, we're saying that Greenwood was just as much a physical location as it was a state of mind. And our goal is to galvanize and inspire people to create Greenwoods wherever we are, utilizing the 5 Think Greenwood principles, which is community love, freedom mind state, ownership, wealth circulation, and will for resilience. So we think that this case puts us right in line with all those Think Greenwood principles.
Wow. Black men deserve to grow old. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that's a good one here. We have one of the poets that comes around here, and that's the name of his poem. Is Black Men Deserve to Grow Old. You know, what's the future? I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Greg.
What's the blessed hope now? What's the future? So you win this case, and then now, you know, what is the blessed hope, the big picture that you hope to get out of this case? What lessons can we learn in the community?
Well, first and foremost, for the Crutcher family, I want them to get some form of resolution. I try not to use the word closure, because regardless of what happens, they lost a son, they lost a brother, they lost a father, etc. So they'll never have real closure. And that's what over 20 years of my practice has shown. There's never any closure when you lose a family member to violence, something like this. But you do need but you do need some finality to the legal process so you can start that healing. So that's first and foremost. I want the clients to be made as best whole as possible. They need to be compensated for what has occurred for the children. So that needs to happen. And then I hope that will spur the city. You know, we have our first ever Black mayor, and I'm hoping that with this case, it can help him continue to move this city forward, continue to make this a better place for all Tulsans, particularly Black Tulsans who suffer so much still under the boot of aggressive policing. And then as a overall community, a national community, this is just another opportunity for us to say, hey, despite the odds, obstacles, and opposition, we must continue to fight. We must continue to come together as a community, and there is hope. This is a time where hope is really hard to have in the time we're living under this Trump 2.0, what I call MAGA delusion, where up is down, water is not wet, and the sun is cold. This is the type of world we're living in, and it's hard to have hope. But a case like this, to say the family and the community came together for 10 years, never lost hope, pulled together resources, got lawyers from all around the country, and now we're moving forward. This is something that we all have to do. We will have losses, we will have setbacks, but just like our ancestors, we got to continue to move forward.
I'm sorry, I got to share this before, because I want young folks. Demario, listen, look at this right here. It's called In the Line of Duty. This is Betty Shelby's course.
Yep. Absolutely.
That's wild.
Teaching the court. Yeah, she was teaching the court. I know.
I mean, it's like sometimes, it's like we literally live in two different Americas. I mean, the divided states of America, literally. Yeah. But I want to talk about the Road to Repair and the Greenwood Trust, which is a historic $105 million reparations initiative proposed by the first Black mayor. What are your thoughts about that? Where does it stand? And do you think it will become a reality?
Yeah, so that $105 million trust was born out of the advocacy and the litigation that we led for our survivors, which we only have one living survivor of the massacre. That's 111-year-old Mother Leslie Benefield Randall. And we're hoping to be able to celebrate her on May 29th at our Greenwood 120 Gala at 111 years young. And we were pushing for those items. And so we created something called Project Greenwood, which the trust takes a lot of the reparations recommendations from Project Greenwood and announced that last June 1st. I do know that the trust, we've had a couple of meetings with the new executive director of the trust, Elena Beverly, who's a lawyer out of DC that's working on that. And so my understanding is that she's on board. I know she has a small staff and they're doing the fundraising, trying to be ready so things can be operational by this next June 1st. And so, we are doing all that we can to help that move forward and hopefully that to be successful. As you know, we do a genealogy. And so we're making sure that our descendants, which we have over 1,000 descendants in our network, that they are front line and ready to go. They're verified. They have their paperwork. So when the money and the benefits start flowing, you don't have to say, well, who do we give it to? We're saying, listen, these are the folks that we know are actual descendants. Let's make sure they're first in line. And we're focused on what we call first generation descendants. These are people who are the children of survivors. So these people are 65 plus, and we're just wanting them to get things as soon as possible. And, I really talk about how we got to this point of the trust and what did it take to really pull all this together. In my book that comes out on May 12th, Redeem a Nation, and you can go to redeemanation.com and check that out. And we really talk about this work. It is a never-ending work. I started working on the massacre. I learned about it in 1997 as a college student at the University of Oklahoma, playing football at the University of Oklahoma. I went to middle school on Greenwood Avenue and never learned about the massacre. And ever since that time, I've been obsessed with getting reparations for our people. And we've gone through a lot of ups and downs. And we're finally there, but we're still fighting. We still need individual cash payments. We still want land return. We still want accountability. They're digging up mass graves today that we want to make sure that they still provide accountability and compensation for people that we never knew. We knew people were in the ground. We didn't know who they are. And now with DNA, they're actually identifying families. And what we're saying is, listen, If you're finding people for the first time, those families deserve reparations. Reparatory justice must be on the table, period, for Black folks across the board.
Wow, that's fascinating because, we all have those unspoken stories. I mean, the whispered stories that we would discuss among our communities and the churches. You do, but it wasn't general knowledge. This is great work to see you doing this. What are some of your biggest barriers there? I mean, if I find it's word of mouth, right? If I know that one of the Johnsons are buried out there or it came up missing back in the day, and then here you come, our new generation, hard-charged attorney, you're getting it done and everything. What are some of the biggest challenges you see in that work?
Oh, it's a lot of challenges. I mean, number one, you're fighting it first and foremost against a system of white supremacy, a system of domination. It's kind of like the previous guest you had on talking about the medical system. And she said, it starts with the belief that Black people are lesser, Black people don't deserve. I mean, that's the thing. We do reparations in this country every day. We know how to do reparations. We give everybody reparations, from, Jewish Holocaust survivors to Japanese internees to even in the wars, they talk about giving Ukraine reparations. And now Iran is asking for reparations. Reparations has been a part of international law for over 500 years. It has become to Black people, but they don't believe we deserve that. It becomes a problem. And we have to first and foremost to break through that. The biggest obstacle, I always say, people say, oh, Black people, we're our own worst enemy. Well, that's a lie. We have a real enemy. We can't be our worst enemy, but we have a real enemy of white supremacy, capitalist system of colonialism. That's our first enemy. But I will say the next thing we do want to conquer is the mind that we cannot be successful, that we cannot break through. We have to believe that reparations is owed and we can get it. We have to talk about it every single day. I understand why we are so at arms about, like, say, DEI. We understand that when they say DEI, they're talking about Black. We get that. But we have to have the same level of commitment and passion around reparations, talking about that every day, because that's the only thing that's going to move us collectively as a community forward. We know that DEI, they're targeting Black folks, but we also know DEI is not going to help en masse the Black community. We know DEI, by the statistics, helps white women more than anyone else. We should be focused on talking about every single day reparatory justice, because that's the only thing that will get our community out of the wealth gap that we're in and take us out of the second-class citizenship. So I want people to just think about that as a mental obstacle. Get over that we should not be talking about reparations every single day. Reparatory justice is absolutely necessary.
I mean, I love that you say that. And I mean, when I think about what's happening here in California, it is a huge conversation that is continually going on every day. People are from the state capitol to organizations, they are talking about reparations. And to see what's happening in Oklahoma, in Tulsa, and the passion that you have for it, and then when we think about what's happening on Capitol Hill, first, it was Sheila Jackson Lee. And now, you see Ayanna Pressley picking up the mantle of HR 40. The conversation is going on. It's up to us as Black media to continue to amplify the work that you all are doing. And so you brought up Mother Randall, the remaining living survivor. What's the latest on her, on that specific battle for justice?
Well, unfortunately, that case, after 4.5 years, was dismissed in June of 2024. And then, so the litigation is over with. But what we are still, and even talking to our Black mayor. So our new Black mayor, he got a lot on his plate from us. We're saying, listen, you need to resolve this Crutcher case for the Crutcher family, and you need to do something specifically for Mother Randall. And we're glad about the trust. We're glad about the holiday that we have on June 1st. To recognize the massacre, but Mother Randall is 111, and she deserves to get something directly from the city. That is reparations. Reparations is not a donation. It's not charitable. Just the fact that she gets something from other folks, that's great. We're proud that through our work, we caused about $1 million to go into the Randall family. We're proud of that, but that was all from private donors. We need the actual perpetrators of the massacre, the city, the county, the Chamber of Commerce, etc., to actually do reparations, repair the harm that you caused. So we're still on that mantle. We still believe she should receive direct cash payments to her that she can see herself. She's 111. She's still here. She's still lucid enough to know, hey, this happened. You received it. You gave this to us. So we're still front and center about that. So even at our awards gala, it's about advocacy. It's about continuing to uplift her story. And the book is continue to uplift their story and say these people deserve to be made whole. The hundreds of insurance claims that were not paid. You know, we did over 200 hours of research to find those insurance companies that are still in existence today, like the Hartford and AIG and Chubbs, that denied claims by the millions of dollars on our people. And we're still calling upon them to pay those claims. Now, that is something that we will just not let go of that. We're going to continue to push that, talk about it every time we get, because people deserve reparatory justice. Land, the land that was taken, we're still saying give that land back. And some people say this is crazy. You can't be asking them to give something back. Well, if they can't give back the land for whatever reason, give the fair market value for what the land is worth today. So we're not going to give this up. And this is why the work that we're doing is not just for Tulsa, it's not just for Oklahoma, it's not just for Greenwood descendants. It is for our people at large, because Greenwood meant something to all of Black America.
I know we have to let you go, but you brought up the insurance companies, and you said you did the research. What is their response when you send them letters and you talk to them about those insurance policies? What are these insurance companies? Because I'm thinking about, we give them money each month.
We do.
And we never use the insurance policies. I mean, so they just get tons and tons of money. What are they saying? What has been their response?
Boy, we just gonna talk the whole morning, because what they said, they basically said this. Listen, the law at the time, they said the same thing that the United States said last week when they didn't want to vote for the resolution that called slavery the greatest crime against humanity. They said it wasn't the law at the time. So why do we need to do any reparations for it? It's the same thing the insurance company said, because remember, the massacre used to be called the Tulsa Race Riot. It was called the Tulsa Race Riot for a specific reason, because once they used the race riot language, it invalidated the insurance claims, because they had race riot clauses in their insurance claims. So they said, listen, this was a race riot, and at the time we didn't have the legal responsibility to pay, and so we're not going to pay today, even though we know what was going on at the time was wrong. So that's the basic bare bones of what they stated. And we have those letters, like I say, Chubb and AIG and Hartford and others that we have. So we haven't given that up either. And hopefully, again, at some point in history, maybe we get Representative Maxine Waters. She gets back the chairperson of the Financial Services Committee, and she can haul them in front of them and haul them in front of her committee and maybe put some pressure on them. But we're not going to give it up. We know where the people live. We know what they own. We know the claims that they made, and they should be paid, period.
I mean, I know we are short on time. Thank you for joining us. We would love to have you come back when you get ready to drop your book, so we can talk about that. And so just thank you for taking the time to really sit and talk with us this morning. We really appreciate it.
I appreciate it. And I'm going to see you in Tulsa in May, right?
Yes, I am coming. Yes, right. Thank you for the invitation. And I will be, my family's from Oklahoma. So I was just sharing, I remember the stories. My grandmother's 94. Her sister is 98. She got another one in Oklahoma that's 100. So I'll be coming to visit them as well. But they told me the stories of how they used to walk to town to deal with Black banking, to deal with Black lawyers, and it was nothing to them. They didn't even think about the white folks. I mean, it was truly, a Black, they found the Black spaces to be in. So I'm really looking forward to coming and just soaking up, my ancestors and, my.
Oh, that's fantastic. It's going to be a great evening. We're honoring Brian Stevenson and Angela and John Rogers. And so it's going to be a great space. I look forward to it.
Likewise. So we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Peace.
All right. Thank you. All right. And Greg, Attorney Simmons brought up Maxine Waters. And so I was having a conversation last week, and it was one of the clips pulled from the show about, some people saying she's 87, it's time for her to go. But I think Attorney Simmons brought up a really good point about if the House flips, she becomes the chair of the Financial Services Committee. And he's already looking at how that is an advantage for the work that he's doing. So we have to be, careful about just outing these older statesmen and Congress members, because the value that they hold, because they've been in Congress so long, is a benefit to us, and we don't want to lose that just because we think they're too old, especially if they still have something to contribute, especially to local issues or state issues like what Attorney Simmons was talking about.
Yeah, I agree with it 100%. When he was mentioning that, I was like, well, she is well able. Why hasn't it happened already? To bring those people to the forefront, and that's part of her mission. It seems like too, as she has that post inside of Congress, right? It's like to really hold these different financial institutions accountable, and it's needed. Yeah,
it's really critical. So when you think about voting, you have to see, like, what does this lawmaker have as far as tenure and their positioning in Congress that will serve our community. Representation matters. So if we have that representation there, are we willing to lose it for age? Because white folks, they get it. Now leave him there.
Yeah,
because he serves a purpose. Okay, we can have everybody rally around him and help that person make the right decision, but keep them there. And so these are things that we have to think about as we prepare for the midterms as well. So we have a couple more stories to get to, but I want to talk about Stevie Wonder. What was it like working for Stevie Wonder, Greg?
That's an excellent question. I still cannot believe it. I worked for him for 25 years and I still cannot believe it. A kid from San Diego, California. I'm working in a, management role for Stevie Wonder, and I think that he is, it can't be understated that he's definitely a genius. There's something, I was telling somebody recently that there is something tangibly divine about him in terms of, you could tell that the creator has embraced this man. You could tell, and he's here for a reason, and working with him is and representing his interests at the radio station was a privilege and an honor, and also gave me a front row seat to community. You know what I mean? And I tell people all the time, it's one thing when you're working at a Black-owned media like KJLH, some stations you might meet and you might talk about the Black Panthers, but at that place, you're going to meet people that were there, and Stevie allowing us to do what we do and be a beacon to the community. Because he could have sold it, y'all. He could have sold that thing and got his checks and kept it pushing. But no, he wanted to make sure that Black people had a voice. And, we lived in that consciousness led by Mr. Wonderful.
Yeah, for sure. And the reason why I brought that up is because KJLH is such an instrumental part of the Black community here in Los Angeles. And we were talking about Auntie Maxine, that is her go-to radio station. Right. And if you want to talk to Black people, that is the radio station you go to. And you also had the opportunity to do community radio. You have the Carl Nelson show, with the Carl Nelson show now, but which was known back then as Front Page, hosted by Carl Nelson. And then you had Jackie Stevens, who has since passed, but she had her show as well, LA Speaks Out. And those were shows that really impacted and uplifted the voice. They had the chat before the chat was chatting on social media, right? It was the phone lines and people would call in. And so I just wanted to take that time to just, center our audience as to who you are, what the contributions that you have made to communications, Black media, Black radio. And I'm just happy to have you here. That's all.
Look at that. Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here. It is such an honor and privilege to be alongside you, Neil. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Right. And no worries. A couple more stories. Keke Palmer, John Legend, and Billy Porter, all people who have been on KJLH. They have led a coalition of 200 entertainers demanding the immediate closure of Texas detention facilities following reports of child abuse. Now, the letter says in part, children belong in schools and on playgrounds, not in detention centers, and they are urging the federal government and CoreCivic to close the Dilley facility immediately. That is art and activism, right in your wheelhouse, mixing art and activism. How important today do you think is for entertainers to speak out and do things like this, or do you think this is just performative?
Ooh, that's a great question. I think I would have to study the three celebrities a little bit more to see if it's performative or not. But however, you know, sometimes it is performative. I think when we hear celebrities, you know, sometimes some celebrities shouldn't speak on things. Just keep it quiet. You know, we see that all the time. You know, Amber Rose, and you know, just do what you do. But I guess I would be guilty of the thing that they told LeBron James to shut up and dribble. And I don't want to be that guy that says that, because you may really have it in your heart to speak out against whatever the issue is. You know, it's a tough one. I would also ask, what is their motivation for starting this movement? It's honorable on its surface, no doubt about it, but why that particular detention center, right? Like, even if you contrast here in Los Angeles County, there's a class action lawsuit against I think it was called I can't remember the name of the juvenile detention center. If you were, you're seeing the ads now, if you were detained in this detention center back in the day, you know, they want to hear from you because they're mounting a class action lawsuit like this. You know, I don't know. Keke Palmer, I don't know her personally, but I just kind of sometimes think she's kind of over the top, which I think is her persona, right? That's her persona of what, you know, who she is as a celebrity. What is their motivation? What caused them to say, hey, we want to get together and be activists and advocate for the closure of this facility?
I would like to see them go and do a call to action and make some signs and see them stand in front of the detention center. I hope that's their next move. I hope their next move is to partner with the organizations that are boots on the ground, you know, that are doing the work, maybe a couple lawmakers, and do a call to action. Get out there in those streets. Stephanie Humphreys, it's KJLH Radio. That's the name of it. And so we'll continue to track the story. I mean, I'm not mad at the letter, but I think that in order to make noise, if you really want to get into the fight, there's another step that needs to happen, and it'll be interesting to see if it happens. No judgment, though. Do what you want to do. And since we're talking about talk radio and why it's so important, especially for our community, we want to lift up Bob Law, the broadcaster behind the groundbreaking political talk show Night Talk. Well, he passed away at the age of 86. Friends and family confirmed on March 30th. And so over a career exceeding 5 decades, Law stood as one of the Black radio's most enduring and I cannot say this word, enduring figures of our time. I'm sorry, I got tongue twisted. But when I think of him, when I think of Bob Law, you know, I think of Carl Nelson, right? You think of the voices like Mark Thompson. You think of the voices like Dick Gregory. And was it Petey Green? Was that?
Petey Green. Yeah, good one.
So you think of these voices that mixed, you know, not just talking about it, not just a letter, but you would also actually find these people out in the streets too, or being the voice of the community when sometimes the community felt like they didn't have a voice.
Yeah, I mean, I often wonder who is that generation was so essential to Black culture. These voices that you mentioned, Bob Law, man, Hall of Famer without question, about just being a voice, keeping us informed, keeping us inspired, giving us the education and the information that we need. News you can use, as we used to say back in the day, and now we have so many different new ways of sharing, information. This show, there's so many others and everything, I hope that today's generation can take notes from the Bob Laws and the Carl Nelsons of the world and understand that it's so important to do this work of informing and inspiring our community. It's essential to our survival in America.
100%, and when we think of like today, you have the Roland Martins, and you have like Tavis Smiley, who has took a deep dive into talk radio, but with new technology, you can now be worldwide, and you don't have to specifically stay to local radio as you did in the past, because the frequency has expanded. And it's much more larger, so it's much more ways. But I also think about this trending topic with Don Lemon right now that's going on, is where he made the difference between a journalist and an influencer. And that right now within our society, the two are getting blurred. And that, you have to understand that the difference between a journalist and a content creator, that they're different. I think they serve a purpose, but facts matter, truth matters. And sometimes you have to do a little more homework to be able to give those facts than just to get on and say what you saw on a scroll.
Yeah. And I think we too have to, it's up to the listeners and the viewers who take the time to find out who's credible and who's not. I was reading a statistic one time that, it was a very high percentage, I don't know, 80% or more of people of a certain age were getting their news sources from Twitter. So basically you're just reading a headline, but you don't go deeper and get the story. That's why we get so much clickbait and all that, nowadays, and stories can get very convoluted. Whereas if you just pay attention and take the time to, listen to the Neil Andersons of the world, you can find out a little bit more and stimulate a little more thought. And that thought process makes a difference in how we roll in the community. It's important.
Yeah. And it's also, important too, because AI, and with this whole new Trump administration, they are intentionally blurring the lines when it comes to news and headlines. I saw a headline yesterday and I had to go and double check. It said that ABC affiliates had walked out of the newsroom.
Wow.
And that these ABC affiliates had to go to the BBC. That's what it said in general. And I was talking to another journalist yesterday and I brought it up. And then at the same time, I was fact checking it, and come to find out that was in Australia.
See,
if I would have put it in the show, you know what I'm saying? It would have been right, but it was also wrong, because it wasn't here in the United States. It happened in Australia. So you have to fact check. And it makes it harder now because of Trump and what he's done with technology and the meetings that they're having at the White House and how they're deciding to feed us information. It just makes it harder to get to the truth. And I think that's intentional. And so as we're, finding stories, just make sure you fact check it, even using AI. Sometimes I have to tell AI, okay, so what's your source? What year did this story come out in? You know what I mean? As Greer says, always tell AI, don't lie to me.
Yeah.
Where'd you get this from? So, it's a new world. AI is very helpful, but you have to fact check AI too.
Yeah, and it definitely is intentional. I mean, you can look at the moves of current government as they move to close, public broadcasting and those types of voices. It's, freedom of speech, freedom of the press is definitely in danger right now, and I think that we as Black media can suffer the most and get hit the hardest first, And so that's why it's important for the public to support Black media 100%, whether it's, through advertising or, whatever it is, donations, subscriptions, whatever, support it. Listen to what we're saying across the country. It's essential. Don't just blow us off anymore. We need love too.
Right. All right. So let's jump into some Black facts before we get out of here. The year of 1950, Dr. Charles Drew, a pioneering physician who protested segregated blood banking, died on this day. And we remember him. I picked this one too because we have the Charles Drew Medical Center, and we have the school that is considered the only HBCU in California. It's some people argue it, some people debate it, but they claim it. Okay, so we're gonna go with it.
That's right. That's right.
So today we remember Dr. Charles Drew, and then we're gonna fast forward to 1984. Sad day, soul icon, the marvelous Marvin Gaye was shot and killed by his father, Marvin Gaye Sr., here in Los Angeles, one day before his 45th birthday. I mean, we were talking about this yesterday about there are some deaths that you remember that are iconic. And I think this one was one of them because today is April Fool's. And a lot of people were like, is this real? Are you trying to April Fool me? I remember my aunt calling crying. And my grandfather thought it was an April Fool. She was like, he gone. He gone. What were you doing on this day? And do you remember it?
I absolutely do. I was fairly new to Los Angeles. I was trying to be a recording engineer, and I was on my way. I was sitting in the back seat of a car on my way to a recording session when it came over KJLH, and we could not believe it. And I remember Al Ramirez pulling the car over so that we could just kind of take in the moment. Like, okay, was this really real? Is this real? Like Marvin Gaye, what? Wait, what happened? It was really, really something.
Yeah, it was really
1984.
1984. Before we let
the Olympics were here too that year.
That is right. And the Olympics will be here in just a little under
2028.
2028. And so we're excited about that. I got my email that I am in the lottery for those 25 tickets. So nice. I'm going to get me about 12 $25 tickets to the Olympics. So I'm really excited about that. I got that email last week. Greg, before we let you go, how can we keep up with you and tell us a little bit about the work you're doing in Long Beach?
Sure, absolutely. You can get me on Instagram at Hannibal the Radio, and there's a few others, but at Hannibal the Radio. Hit me up online too, HannibalMediaGroup.com, BeachCityRadio.com. Just Google me, you'll figure it out, and I'll get you. Yeah, I've developed now. I'm an arts and culture advocate, and I just completed 2 terms as the board president of the Arts Council for Long Beach. Which puts me in a space that advocates across the state for all aspects of art. I'm sitting right now in my art gallery in downtown Long Beach. It's Blue Art and Wellness Gallery in downtown Long Beach. We do feature mainly African-American artists. We're just concluding Women's History Month. We got one more event to do, the Black Women Are Divine with the BLM Long Beach. That's happening on this Saturday. We have a beautiful gallery here of great works by pieces that have given us some outstanding works. And so, Neil, we got to get you out here so you can see what we do. We open the gallery space to community for meetings and town hall meetings and all of that sort of thing. Book signings. We had Jane Kennedy here. Oh my goodness, it was really fun. And so that's the type of work that I've been doing. I'm still active, still doing broadcasting, podcasts, documentaries, all things media. We're still doing it. Plus, I sell coffee. We import coffee from Cameroon.
Oh, okay. There's Greg J. There.
So that was with Jesse Jackson. Yes.
Right. We want to thank you for joining us this morning. We'd love to have you back. And okay, folks, you know what it is. For the latest in Black news, don't forget the Supreme Court is ruling on the 14th Amendment today, so we need to be paying attention to that. we'll tap into that tomorrow. For all of these developing stories, visit blackpressusa.com or visit your local Black newspaper's website. There's one in every city near you. So until tomorrow, be safe. Peace out, y'all.
Peace and blessings.